On a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon, Gabriel was immersed in quarterly financials, eyes flicking between spreadsheets and client emails. As Chief Strategy Officer at one of Chicago's fastest-growing logistics firms, his days were dense with numbers, forecasts, and high-stakes decisions. The last thing he expected was a phone call that would unravel the life he thought he had built on loyalty and love. The call came from his younger sister, Sierra, a hotel operations manager at a luxury resort in Maui. She rarely called during work hours unless it was urgent. "Gabriel," she said, her voice low and cautious, "are you absolutely sure Naomi is in New York this week?" He chuckled softly, barely looking up from his laptop. "Yeah, she flew out Sunday for that product launch. Why?" There was a pause, longer than usual. Sierra's next words came like ice water poured down his spine. "She's not in New York. She's here. I just saw her by the infinity pool, holding hands with some guy in designer sunglasses. They used your Amex to order a private cabana and champagne." Gabriel froze. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, now useless. For a moment, everything else, spreadsheets, clients, the buzzing office outside his glass door, melted into silence. He forced a breath into his lungs. "Are you sure it's her?" "I'd bet my job," Sierra replied. "She's wearing the blue dress you bought her in Florence." Gabriel didn't respond. He couldn't. The breath he had just drawn sat heavy in his chest, unmoving. He minimized the spreadsheet, staring blankly at his desktop background. A photo of him and Naomi, smiling under the cherry blossoms in D.C. last spring. That trip had been her idea, or so he thought. He whispered, "Send me a photo." 10 seconds later, it appeared. The image was sharp, crystal clear. Naomi, laughing, head tilted toward a man Gabriel had never seen. The same woman who just 48 hours earlier had kissed him goodbye and said, "Wish me luck in New York." It wasn't the laughter that crushed him. It was the ease of it, the familiarity, the comfort in her body language. This wasn't some drunken slip-up. This was orchestrated, hidden beneath plane tickets and alibis under his own name and credit. His pulse quickened, not with rage, but with the eerie calm of clarity. Something had shattered, yes, but not just his heart. The illusion, the trust, the belief that Naomi was in this partnership with him, and what replaced it wasn't screaming or tears. It was resolve. She thought he wouldn't find out, but she had no idea who she'd betrayed. Leo sat frozen, the buzz of his office lights replaced by the deafening silence in his head. His thumb trembled over his phone screen as the phono from his brother, Jade, loaded. There she was, Maya. Her long auburn hair fluttered in the tropical breeze as she laughed beside a man Leo had never seen. Her hand rested gently on the stranger's arm, and her body leaned into his as if molded by trust, not shame. The backdrop was unmistakable, Lake Palikai, a private Hawaiian resort reserved for luxury and lovers. But Maya was supposed to be in New York. That's what she said 2 days ago, with a kiss on the cheek and a half-packed suitcase. "Just business meetings and maybe a gallery stop," she had murmured, barely making eye contact. Now, staring at her sun-kissed smile, Leo realized he hadn't misheard. He had been lied to. He called her once, twice. No answer. By the 4th attempt, her phone went straight to voicemail. Leo's breath caught in his throat, not from sorrow,
but from the slow burn of betrayal hardening into rage. This was the same woman he had stayed up with through countless 2 a.m. nights, proofreading her proposals and building pitch decks. The same Maya he had supported through graduate school after her loan fell through. The same woman's dreams he helped finance by emptying his savings account to give her startup the runway it needed. And now, that same Maya had taken their shared victories and repurposed them into a fantasy with another man under the sun, paid for with his credit card. He opened their banking app and began to scroll. $950, oceanfront suite. $210, couples massage. $180, champagne tasting. $75, custom engraved wine glasses. $2,100 in 48 hours. All from the account they swore they'd use only for shared investments. Each transaction was a wound. But Leo didn't scream, he didn't cry. Instead, a terrifying calm settled over him. She expected him to rage, to yell, maybe even fly down to Hawaii in a jealous storm. But that's not who Leo was. Not anymore. He wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of chaos. He was going to give her consequences. He stood from his desk, not with panic, but with precision. He stared at the framed photo of the two of them in Iceland, one of their happiest trips, now a tainted memory. He didn't tear it down. He didn't smash it. He turned it face down. Then he pulled out his laptop, opened a new spreadsheet, and labeled it Project Sandstorm. If Maya wanted paradise, Leo would let her have it. For now. But soon she'd learn paradise was built on fragile ground. He called Jade back. "Keep watching," he said. "I need timestamps, photos, receipts. Quiet, discreet. Don't let her see you." "You got it," Jade replied, his voice shifting into serious mode. "You're planning to come here?" Leo paused. "No," he said. "Not yet. First, I plan." As he ended the call, he looked out the window of his office. Below, people laughed, strolled, rushed. Life went on. But inside him, something cracked open. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't grief. This was war. A quiet, calculated war waged with truth, documentation, and relentless clarity. He began compiling evidence, emails, credit card transactions, old messages where she had sworn transparency, images of Maya in meetings she claimed to be attending, only now they looked staged, suspicious. The betrayal was thorough, but so was Leo. She had used his kindness. She had confused his patience for passivity. But Maya had forgotten. Leo was not the man you fooled. He was the man who kept records, who saw patterns. He built systems for a living, and now she had entered his system. And in that system, there was no room for liars.
Leo stood in the dim light of his new apartment, the sting of betrayal still burning beneath his calm exterior. After the shock of discovering Ava's affair with her coworker, Brent, a man he had once helped get promoted, he knew he couldn't afford to crumble. Instead, he began calculating, channeling every ounce of pain into clarity. Rather than confronting Ava immediately, Leo reached out to Jade, his longtime friend and a cybersecurity consultant. "I need everything," he said, his voice low but steady. Jade didn't ask questions. She'd known Leo for over a decade and trusted his judgment. Within hours, she began pulling receipts, tracing bank transfers, gathering digital GPS breadcrumbs, and compiling everything into a secure archive. Every suspicious dinner, every hotel charge, every app login, they built a map of deceit. But Leo didn't stop there. He reached out to Maya, a former colleague and now a rising name in the data science world.
Maya specialized in forensic analytics, and when Leo laid out the situation, she nodded solemnly. "I'll build you a timeline," she promised. "Every message, every appointment, every lie, they'll all have a time code." As Maya dove into Ava's shared calendar, social media posts, and iCloud data, something chilling emerged. Ava had used Leo's own tech skills against him. She had installed a hidden app on his phone, tracking his movements to ensure he wasn't home before sneaking Brent into their house. Leo's blood ran cold, but not from heartbreak anymore, from resolve. It took 2 weeks, but by the end of it, Leo had in his hands a full dossier, a legal-grade report that told a story of months of deception. From spa appointments booked minutes after Leo left for business trips, to dual charges at restaurants where Ava claimed she was meeting clients, every detail was logged and cross-referenced. And then came the final blow. Jade found a deleted conversation thread recovered from cloud storage. Brent and Ava had mocked Leo openly in private messages, calling him Mr. Oblivious, joking about how he worked late to pay for their secret getaways. Leo read the lines with clenched fists. His hurt didn't explode into rage. He was beyond that. What bloomed inside him was strategy. He met with a lawyer, supplying all evidence, well-documented, chronological, and impossible to dismiss. The lawyer, visibly impressed, nodded. With this much proof, you could not only win a clean divorce, but potentially press charges for emotional damages and financial fraud. But Leo didn't want revenge for the sake of revenge. He wanted to reclaim his narrative. He had been seen as the quiet, supportive husband, never the one to speak out. Now he would write the ending to this chapter on his terms. He called Ava in for a conversation, one she didn't see coming.
Leo stared out of the window of his apartment as the Pacific breeze drifted in. Below, the bustle of Honolulu carried on, unaware of the quiet storm building in his mind. The files he'd built with Jade and Maya weren't just proof, they were leverage, and now it was time to use them. He picked up his phone and dialed the one person he knew would understand the gravity of what he was facing, Emma Harada. She was one of Hawaii's most respected family law attorneys, known for her calm precision and a track record of winning some of the state's most complex divorce and fraud cases. She was also an old friend of Leo's mother, and she'd seen firsthand what betrayal looked like in legal terms. "Emma," he said when she answered, "I'm ready to file." Within hours, Leo was sitting across from Emma in her polished Kakako office, surrounded by thick case files, glass walls, and an ocean view that gave the illusion of peace. Emma opened the folder Leo handed her, scanning the neatly organized evidence: financial misappropriation, location logs, private messages, shared account statements. Her eyes didn't widen. She had seen worse, but her voice lowered with weight. "This isn't just infidelity, Leo. This is systematic manipulation, exploitation of shared assets, emotional deceit with financial consequences. You're not just divorcing a wife. You're holding a con artist accountable." Leo nodded slowly. He had long moved past heartbreak. Now it was about clarity. "He don't want to destroy her, but I want to make sure she knows actions have consequences. I want this to be clean, precise, irrefutable." Emma tapped a pen against the table. "We'll file under marital fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. She used marital funds for personal gratification without disclosure. That alone qualifies. But with the added emotional deceit and your documented evidence, she won't have ground to stand on." Leo exhaled. Finally, this wasn't just survival. This was control. For the next 2 weeks, Emma and her team meticulously drafted the complaint, every receipt, Every suspicious payment, every instance where Ava misused joint resources to finance her affair became a piece of the puzzle. But Leo's instructions were clear. There would be no media leaks, no sensationalism, no public humiliation. This wasn't about revenge. This was about accountability. Meanwhile, Ava remained unaware. She posted selfies at a beachfront restaurant with Brent, captioned, "New Beginnings, Hawaii," as if nothing was looming. Leo saw them, but didn't flinch. He wasn't operating on the level of emotional response anymore. He was orchestrating a shift in power, quiet, surgical, permanent. Then came the notice. Ava received the official complaint while having brunch with Brent. According to their mutual friend, she laughed at first, until she read the line about fiduciary fraud, until she realized that her digital footprint had been traced, her financial moves monitored, and every lie logged and compiled. She texted Leo later that night. "What is this? You're suing me?" He replied with a single line. "Actions have consequences. No more, no less." The next morning, her attorney called Emma. They wanted to negotiate. Suddenly, the woman who had ridiculed Leo's silence, who had called him too passive and too slow to react, was scrambling for a settlement. But Leo wasn't after punishment. He was after peace and power. He requested 3 things: a clean break with no alimony, full reimbursement of misused joint funds, a legally binding statement acknowledging misuse of shared resources. It was Emma's idea to add the third. She said, "It's symbolic. It's her signature on her own dishonesty." That matters. When Ava pushed back, trying to negotiate better terms, Emma held firm. "We can go to trial, but we have all the evidence. And the longer this stays open, the more exposure there is for your client." Within a week, Ava folded. The documents were signed. Leo walked out of the law office that day a free man, not just in the legal sense, but emotionally. There were no loud victories, no celebrations, just the quiet certainty that he had reclaimed control of his life without stooping to vengeance. And that was what Ava never saw coming. She thought he would scream, break things, chase after her. Instead, he handed her a mirror, made of paper and law, and let her drown in her own reflection.
The next morning at the resort, Maya breezed down to the breakfast lounge in her flowing white cover-up, sunglasses perched atop her head. She looked every bit the picture of vacation bliss, until the cashier at the boutique cafe politely informed her that her card had been declined. "Try again," she said, waving it off like a glitch. The cashier obliged, declined, again. Confused, she marched to the front desk to ask about her room charges. The clerk checked politely, then offered, "It seems there's a freeze on the card under Mr. Elias's name. You may need to contact your bank." Panic surged through Maya's chest. No, this must be a mistake," she snapped. "Run it again." But it wasn't a mistake. Every account tied to Leo, every shared line of credit, every emergency fund she'd tapped into had been frozen. Maya stepped away from the desk, frantically scrolling through her phone, trying to log into their banking app, only to find her access had been revoked. Her palms began to sweat. Her breath shortened. Then, just as she was about to call Leo, a man in a simple gray polo approached her. "Mrs. Elias," he asked with a professional smile, "this was left for you by a guest." He handed her a sealed white envelope, then turned and walked away before she could even question him. Curious and slightly trembling, she peeled it open. Inside was a message typed on thick ivory paper. "Smile. "You're not on vacation anymore." Beneath it, she found a copy of a detailed spreadsheet labeled Resort Expenditures Unauthorized Use, outlining every transaction she had made using Leo's accounts. Accompanying the sheet were photos, candid ones, her lounging beside Tristan, sipping champagne, holding hands on the boat, kissing under the tiki lights. Screenshots of the resort's security feed, even timestamps from dinner receipts. At the bottom of the envelope was a sleek, black USB drive. Maya stood frozen in the hallway, heart thudding like a war drum. Her knees buckled slightly as she scanned the evidence. There was no denying it. No, it's not what it looks like this time. It was everything it looked like, and worse. She stormed back to her suite, slamming the door behind her, barely noticing Tristan trailing behind with an awkward, "What's wrong?" She didn't answer. She ripped the USB drive from the envelope, shoved it into her laptop, and hit play. And there it was. Every moment Malik had recorded, the dancing, the poolside caresses, the whispered lies, all playing back in cold, cinematic clarity. A documentary of betrayal starring herself. Her hands flew to her mouth as she gasped. Then came the knock. "Ma'am," the concierge's voice came through the door, "you've received another delivery." This time was a legal envelope, sealed, certified, and bearing the insignia of a local Hawaiian law firm. Inside was the bombshell. A divorce petition citing fraudulent use of marital assets, emotional abandonment, and breach of trust. Alongside it, a temporary restraining order from all joint accounts and properties. Maya's world crumbled like a sandcastle under a tsunami. She turned to Tristan, who had begun backing toward the door as he read over her shoulder. "You told me you were separated," he muttered, stunned. I didn't think he'd find out so fast. He wasn't supposed to." He didn't stay to hear the rest. He left quietly, shaking his head, as Maya sank onto the edge of the bed, the ocean view now a cruel backdrop to a fantasy gone up in smoke. Leo, back on the mainland, received confirmation from his attorney. Delivery successful, freeze secured, lawsuit filed. The power balance had shifted. The man who was once blindsided now stood at the helm of the storm, with facts, control, and dignity on his side.
When the final court ruling came through, Leo sat quietly in his office, not in celebration, but in quiet reflection. The assets had been divided, the debts reassigned, and his name was cleared. The betrayal that once felt like a dagger now sat dull in his memory, replaced by something far more powerful: self-respect. Maya never returned home. After the scandal broke, she vanished from their social circle. Tristan, too, faded into silence once he realized he had merely been a pawn in a reckless game. But Leo didn't chase justice in their downfall. He had already won when he chose dignity over drama, logic over revenge. He moved into a modest house by the lake, peaceful, with large windows and quiet mornings. Every Saturday he took walks with his niece, who had started calling him Uncle Lee the Genius. He began mentoring young tech founders, not because he needed the work, but because he remembered what it felt like to build something from pain. What had been torn down wasn't his life, it was just an illusion. The real Leo had survived, grown, reclaimed his voice. And in that journey, he found something Maya and her betrayal could never take from him: clarity. One afternoon, while watching the sunset cast gold across the water, he turned to Maya's final message, the one she sent after the lawsuit ended. "I didn't know you were capable of this," it read. He smiled softly. Neither did she. Life has a cruel way of testing us through loss,
But sometimes it's through that very unraveling that we rediscover who we really are. Leo's story isn't one of destruction. It's one of quiet, unwavering rebirth. Betrayal didn't break him. It revealed him. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button for more powerful stories of redemption, truth, and resilience. And don't forget to turn on notifications. We've got more coming that will speak straight to your heart.